I've always hated basements, not because of the darkness or the cobwebs, but because of the silence that seemed to ring there. When my brother and I moved into the old house, I immediately realized that the basement would become a place I wouldn't want to go down if I didn't have to. But life, as usual, had its own way. We bought the house cheaply, and the reason was obvious. It was half abandoned, with peeling walls, cracks in the ceiling, and the smell of dampness. But it was spacious inside, and my father said it was a great opportunity to start from scratch. The basement was supposed to be a workshop. My father had a dream of repairing old furniture. For the first few weeks, he spent all his free time there, hauling boards, tools, old chairs, whittling and sawing. At first, I just watched him try to liven up this house. Sometimes he helped. He held a flashlight, handed nails. At that time, there was a constant hum in the basement, from the heating pipe and the old fan, which my father turned on to remove the smell of mold at least a little. I didn't like being there, but my father said, "You can get used to the sounds." After a couple of months, we more or less settled in. My mother took care of the kitchen, my brother took care of the yard, and I was just looking for a place to retire. But one day, everything changed. That evening, my father called me to help him carry some boxes downstairs. It was about midnight. He said he wouldn't make it in the morning, and things were getting in the way. The basement was cold, and the air felt like it was standing there. The light bulb in the ceiling was blinking, casting short shadows on the tools and the old sofa. There was a child's mannequin in the corner. My father used it when he was sewing clothes for an old armchair. I noticed then how this piece of plastic with dim eyes seemed to be watching, but I forced myself not to think about it. We put the boxes down. My father muttered something about a shelf that needed to be reinforced and went upstairs. I stayed for a minute to check if he had turned off the faucet. Suddenly, in the silence, there was a sound, light, as if something small was rolling on the floor. I turned around and saw the ball. The old cracked ball that used to be in the toolbox was now lying at my feet. I didn't pay attention. I probably fell when they were moving the box. He bent down, picked it up, and threw it back. But it rolled again, slowly, as if someone had pushed him. Then I just cursed, put the ball in the box, and left. I couldn't sleep for a long time last night. The next day, my father said that he was going to cover part of the basement with plywood, saying that it was blowing there. I've been helping him all day. We hammered in several boards, reinforced shelves, and took out some of the trash. But sometime in the late afternoon, I noticed that there was a narrow passage in the far corner of the basement. At first I thought it was just a shadow, but when I got closer, there really was a gap in the concrete wall, as if a piece of masonry had settled. My father said, "Don't touch it, we'll figure it out later." But that passage haunted me at night, not out of curiosity, but out of a feeling that the cold is coming from there. I could hear a faint hum, as if an old engine was running somewhere underground. When I went downstairs again, there were old toys on the shelf next to the workbench, a wooden horse, a car, and a battered teddy bear. I haven't seen them before. I thought then that my father might have found them in the boxes, but why didn't he say anything? I picked up the bear. It smelled of earth and some kind of mustiness, like it had been lying underground for years. From that evening on, the basement became a place I no longer wanted to go down. But more and more often, my father asked me to help him change a light bulb or hold a board. He became more silent, as if tired. Sometimes I noticed him sitting at the entrance to the basement at night and looking down. I asked him once, "Dad, why are you sitting there at night?" He replied without emotion, "Just listening." I didn't understand what he meant at the time, but after that he began to hear it himself. Sometimes when the house was quiet, strange noises could be heard from below. Not footsteps, not speech, just like someone fiddling with something, like a child playing downstairs, dropping toys. And the further away, the more distinct these sounds became. I started waking up to these sounds almost every night. At first I thought it was my father fiddling with tools again. He used to go down to the basement at 3 in the morning when he couldn't sleep. But one day I looked into his room. He was asleep. The door to the basement was ajar and cold air was coming out, as if from a refrigerator. I went down a couple of steps, holding my phone in my hand like a flashlight. There are tools, boards, and pieces of cloth on the floor. Everything is in place. There was only a ball in the middle of the room, the one with the cracks. It was swaying slowly, as if someone had just touched it. I stood there, not moving, until I heard a light click, as if something had hit concrete. I turned on the light brighter and noticed a small plastic truck in the far corner, behind the workbench. It rolled across the floor, stopping at the wall. I got closer and realized that there were footprints under my feet, tiny, no bigger than a palm, in the dust, leading out of that very crack in the wall. I didn't wake my father. I just went back upstairs and locked the door to the basement. In the morning, the door was opened again. At first, I thought it was my brother joking, but he insisted that he did not go down there at all. He said that the basement stinks of dead meat. The smell was getting stronger every day. My father said there might be a dead rat under the floor, but he never checked. In the evening of the same day, he placed a stool at the entrance to the basement and said he would be on duty. I thought he was crazy, a grown man guarding the basement. But he sat there until the morning with a flashlight, not saying a word. The next day he looked exhausted. His eyes were red and his hands were shaking. I asked him, "What did you see there?" He answered softly, as if he was afraid that someone would hear, "There's someone playing." Since then, the house became unbearable. My mother started avoiding conversations, and my brother started spending the night with friends. Only my father and I stayed here, and there was something invisible hanging between us. At night, I could hear louder and louder sounds from the basement, the knocking, the squealing of toy wheels, and the falling of objects. I started recording sounds on a dictaphone. When I listened to it, I broke out in a cold sweat. There really was a sound there, children's laughter. It was barely perceptible, short, as if someone was quietly snorting with joy. I showed the recording to my father. He looked at it, paled, and simply said, "Don't touch it anymore. No microphones, no lights, nothing." But I couldn't. There was something about this place that attracted me, as if I had to figure out what was going on. I started going downstairs during the day, checking the walls, the floor, looking for animals, the source of the sound. Nothing. Just this passage in the wall. And the longer I looked at it, the more it seemed that there was not just a cold smell coming from it, but some kind of metallic smell, like from old blood. One day I noticed that the plywood that we used to cover part of the wall was slightly shifted. Something glittered under it. I took it off and saw an old metal door, narrow, rusty, without a handle. It seemed to lead somewhere further into the foundation. I called my father, but he just shook his head. "It's none of your business." From that night on, he stopped sleeping altogether. He was sitting at the door to the basement, holding a hammer in his hands. When I tried to speak, he just repeated, "If you hear something calling you, don't answer." On the third night, I woke up to a sound that could no longer be ignored. Not a game, not a laugh, but a cry. Childish, quiet, as if someone is sitting downstairs and calling. And at that moment, I realized that my father had gone there. The door was open and the light was on. His flask was lying on the stairs, and then his footprints were dark and wet. I came down with a crowbar in my hand. The air was heavy, and it smelled of iron and mold. There were toys on the floor by the metal door, a truck, cubes, a ball, everything covered in mud as if someone had just played with them, and there's a boot print right under the door. I sat down and touched the door. It was cold, as if it was blowing through from the inside. And then I heard a click, as if something had fallen inside. I stood in front of that door for a long time,
The air seemed to thicken, and every breath sounded in my ears. It felt like I was standing in front of something that would be better left alone. But his father had disappeared, and the only direction he could go was there. I felt the edge of the door, tried to pry it with a crowbar. The metal creaked as if it was resisting. The smell hit me right away, heavy, sour, as if rotten wood had been mixed with rust and dampness. When the door opened, I saw a narrow hallway. No light, just the dim reflection of my flashlight on the concrete walls. The air was cold and humid. I took a couple of steps and heard a board creaking somewhere below. There were remnants of wooden flooring underfoot. There was old wiring on the walls, sagging and broken in some places. It seemed that this was not just a basement, but an old technical tunnel. I walked until I came to a fork in the road. It was littered with rocks on the right, and on the left I could hear a faint sound like breathing or air movement. I turned there. At the end of the corridor was a small room, if you could even call it a room, a low-ceilinged concrete box with no windows. There was a table on the floor, and on it were some tools, jars of nails, a coil of wire, and old photographs. I picked up one, and there were 3 children on it, and my father is among them. He was younger, about 10 years old, wearing the same shirt that I found in his old things. On the back is a signature, faded but legible. Basement Playtime. I felt like everything was getting cold inside. The photo looked old, but the place on it was too familiar. The same walls, the same lamp, the same workbench, only cleaner. I turned around. There was a board on the wall behind me with names carved on it. Some are crossed out. The last one was written, the father's name. There was a nail next to it, driven deep, as if someone had completed the list. I didn't have time to realize what that meant when I heard a soft sound behind me, like something rolling on the floor. I turned around and saw the ball. He was lying at my feet, the same one, but now covered in mud. And then I heard a knock. It wasn't loud, but it sounded like someone was touching the wall on the other side. Then again. I went up to the wall and put my hand on it. There was a muffled noise coming from there, like a man punching but unable to speak. I shouted, "Dad! It's you!" The knocking became more frequent, but there was no answer. I grabbed the crowbar and hit the wall. The concrete crumbled, and the earth fell out from under the cement layer. I dug until I saw a piece of cloth, then my hand. I stepped back. My whole body clenched in horror. It was the father. He lay as if asleep, his face gray, his lips parted. His fingers were clutching something, an old toy, the teddy bear. I knelt down, not knowing what to do. His eyes were open but empty. There are scratches on the wall next to him, deep and messy, like he was trying to get out. My chest felt empty. I sat next to him until I heard a soft thump, thump, thump above me. 3 short strokes. At first I thought it was fear making my ears ring, but then I realized that the sound was coming from above, from the house. I got back out, panting, my hands shaking. He came out of the basement and closed the door, but the knock, knock, knock didn't stop. I went up to the kitchen and everything was fine, but the pounding continued, now from somewhere on the floor. I bent down and listened, the sound of rolling, then the fall of something light. I walked slowly towards the stairs leading to the second floor and stopped. There was a ball on the top step. I froze, looking at him. The ball couldn't have ended up here by itself. I left it downstairs. And he didn't just leave. I saw him lying next to his father's body. But he was here, on a clean, creaking step, in the middle of silence. I didn't move. I just listened. The house was dead quiet. Even the clock in the kitchen seemed to have stopped ticking. I took a step back, but the floor crunched under my foot. And at the same moment from above, from the attic, I heard the same sound that had previously come from the basement, a light rolling. Something was rolling. My gaze darted between the stairs up and the door down. The thought was throbbing in my head. Someone was in the house. I got up slowly, feeling cold sweat running down my back. Every step echoed with a hum. When I reached the end of the stairs, the air there was different, thick, with the smell of dust and something old, as if everything above had not been touched for years. The door to the attic was ajar. The gap was narrow, but it was cold. I pushed the door open. It made a long creak, as if it was waking up from a long sleep. Inside, there's nothing but junk, boxes, old frames, or rolled up carpet. I lit up the corners, but it was empty, but the sound didn't stop. Somewhere, under the boards, deep into the attic, something was rolling, slowly, as if it was being sluggishly pushed. I knelt down and shined the light between the boards. Glass glinted in the darkness. I used a crowbar to pry open one of the boards. Below it is a narrow space, no more than a meter in height. There were toys there. Dozens. Old, dirty, burned in places. Everything, arranged evenly, in rows. Among them is a truck, cubes, and a ball. My ball. And another one. And more. The same ones. Hundreds of identical ones, as if someone had collected them like a collection. I backed away, trying not to make a sound, and then a breath came out of the darkness. Not loud, not a whisper, just calm, masculine, very close. I turned around and there was nothing behind me, but the door I came through was closed. I walked up and pushed the door open. It opened, and the lantern revealed a narrow room that looked like an old storage room. There are rusty hooks and wooden crates and sacks on the walls. There was a man sitting on the floor in the middle, with his back to me. His head is down, his hands are tied with a belt. "Dad?" I said. He didn't move. He just exhaled softly, barely audibly. I came up and walked around to the side. It wasn't the father. A man, a stranger, thin with gray hair and ragged clothes. The eyes are half closed. Around his neck is an old badge stained with mud. I couldn't make out the writing, just the word technician. He moved his lips. "They're not leaving." His voice is hoarse, as if his throat had been burned. "Who?" I asked. He didn't answer. He just raised his hand and pointed towards the wall. I shined the light there and saw a manhole cut through. Narrow, barely big enough to fit through. It's dark inside. There was a toy lying on the edge. The same truck, only a shiny new one, as if someone had just taken it out of the box. The man looked at me and said softly, "If you hear a name being called, don't answer." He threw back his head, his eyes rolled back, and his breathing stopped. I was left standing alone. My head was buzzing. I took a step towards the manhole and shined the light inside. There was a long corridor leading off, and somewhere deeper, a faint light flickered, either a reflection or a flashlight, and a quiet sound, childish, deaf, like when a car is being rolled on the floor. I knelt and looked in. There were palm marks on the walls, small ones, covered in dust. I knew I had to leave, go upstairs, call the police, but something was pressing in my chest, forcing me to keep going. Maybe because somewhere inside I was afraid that there, at the end of the tunnel, I'd find the answer, or that I'd find someone who was still alive. I crawled inside. The tunnel was narrow and the concrete crumbled under my hands. The air is thick with the smell of mold and rust. After a couple of meters, I saw it turn, and beyond it a room. There are dozens of boxes on the floor, each with toys neatly stacked, like in the attic. Only here they were new. No dust, no dirt, and among them, a photo. My father in the foreground, there's this room in the back. I realized that he was here for a reason, that he was looking for something, or someone else, and then I heard a voice, not loud, not a whisper, just calm, masculine, very close. I turned around and there was nothing behind me, but the door I came through was closed. I stood there, in the middle of darkness, and then I heard another random knock from above. 3 short knocks, and then the sound of rolling. A car rolling across the floor, and the fall of something light. I turned to go back, but the door was closed. I shouted again, but there was no answer, and I couldn't open it. I grabbed the crowbar, but this time, the door didn't yield. The metal banged, but it didn't open. The hinges held.
I rushed to the door, threw my whole body against it. It was useless. The metal didn't even shake. The lantern flickered faintly, as if from lack of battery,
and in this semi-darkness, the room seemed different. The toys suddenly looked not just new, but identical, as if they were made according to the same template. Cars, dolls, figurines, each in its own place, and there's a little piece of paper on each one, with a name. In my name, repeated dozens of times. I dropped the flashlight. He rolled, stopped at the box, and the light picked out a shelf on the wall from the darkness. There's a photo on it. Not one, not two, but a whole gallery. They were all taken here, in this same room. But there are people in each picture. Men, women, teenagers, all with the same expression of horror, as if they were forced to look directly into the camera at the last moment. In the center is the father. He was standing with the same crowbar that I was holding a few minutes ago. Only in his hand, it wasn't a defensive weapon. He held it like a tool. Scrawled under the photo, "Continuator." I backed away. My heart was pounding in my ears. And then I heard a sound that made my skin crawl. The soft click of a camera shutter behind. I turned around. There was a tripod in the corner with an old camera on it. The lens was pointed directly at me. The click was repeated, then another one. I rushed to her, grabbed her, but she wasn't connected to anything. No wires, no battery, just a case. Clicked again, already behind me. I turned abruptly, and there was a figure standing in the doorway. The same silhouette that I saw at night in the window, but now I saw more. He was wearing a dark apron, and his arms were stained to the elbows. A thin, transparent film mask covered his face, revealing the contours of his eyes, mouth, and pale skin. He took a step closer. I lifted the crowbar, but my feet seemed rooted to the floor. "Why did you come?" The voices muffled, as if from inside the wall. "Where is my father?" I exhaled. "He made a choice. Now it's your turn." He held out his hand. There was a photograph in it, fresh and warm, as if it had just been printed. I took it, unable to look away. I'm in the picture. I'm standing here with a crowbar, illuminated by a trembling lantern. When did you make it?" I began. But he was already gone. He simply disappeared into the darkness, leaving behind only cold air and the smell of iron. The door was open behind me. I don't remember how I got out, only how I found myself back on the street, running, tripping over my own feet. When I got home, it was dawn. I called the police. They've arrived. We checked the basement. They said there was nothing there. No rooms, no doors, no bodies. Just an old staircase and trash. But before they left, one of them asked, "Did you put this photo on the porch?" I didn't understand what he was talking about. Came out. There was a photograph on the steps. I'm standing at the entrance to the house. Taken from the street. In the background is a figure in the window behind my back. I burned the picture, but it appeared the next day. And again. A little closer each time. Now I'm afraid to open the curtains, because at some point he will stop just standing there. He will do fine.